Hi, this is Lewis with Women Are Saving the World Now. And we're here with Alya Kayal, who is with Calvert Investments, and she's going to speak with us a little bit about the women's principles. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Good. Well, first of all, I was so inspired by reading that the company had invested in developing the women's principles and then how they were applying them globally to their work. Can you tell me, for the audience who may not be familiar with this, where the principles were developed and how they came about and what they're there to do?
Great. Well, at Calvert, we recognize that diversity is important, just as important to us as investors as it is to many of you. And the question early on, particularly in the early 2000s, was looking at the situation of the global supply chain, where we are finding increasing number of women working in factories, on the factory floors. And then there was a lot of issues around the lack of women in the workplace in terms of diversity on the boards and moving up the ladder within the workplace. We started looking at corporate sustainability reports in those years and found that there was sort of a glaring omission of looking at these issues through a gender lens. There really was no corporate code of conduct for women in the workplace. There are plenty of principles for women with respect to international human rights conventions and such. But there was really nothing that addressed, that we were able to find, that addressed the issue of women in the workplace. And so in 2004, Calvert developed a set of principles which are called the Calvert Women's Principles. And these principles, really the impetus behind this was not just to draft of principles that were, of course, contemporary and best practices, but how can we actually apply them? What is the implementation? Because we find that within the world of sustainability, that there are many codes of conduct out there. There are many wonderful principles that are written on lovely pieces of paper with nice pictures on them, but that they're not really being implemented, and there's no framework for implementation. So when we developed that in mind, we developed the Calvert Women's Principles. We engage with companies that we invest in. As investors, we have the right to engage with companies in the US, and so we engage with them on how they were implementing the Calvert Women's Principles. Amazingly, a lot has happened since then, Lewis. We have had 2 signature initiatives that have come out of the Calvert Women's Principles.
Right.
One is a domestic focus, and that I'd like to share with you is in 2008, the city of San Francisco, along with a very well-respected civil society organization called Verite, you may have heard of Verite's work, and Calvert together, launched the Gender Empowerment Principles, GEP. And this focus is really on the Bay Area companies, so they can take Calvert Women's Principles as a centerpiece and use it through the GEP to actually apply to Bay Area companies. Just a few months ago, they also launched a website which offers practical tools, so companies, it's a one-stop shop. Companies can go in and look at how they are measuring and how they're performing with respect to the principles. So it's a great domestic focus. Yeah. And then on the international side, the UN Global Compact, which is an agency of the UN, and the UNIFEM, which is the UN Development Fund for Women in Calvert. Again, Calvert Women's Principles was the centerpiece, and they're able to take those principles and develop the women's empowerment principles and take it in a global level and in an international context. So while we certainly, we're just wonderful in to be able to actually develop those principles, but they've actually taken on different aspects of it. And that way I think we can really use our voice as investors to really encourage the empowerment and advancement of women at different levels, and domestically with respect to the city of San Francisco, and then internationally and globally as well.